Do you mirror in your yoga classes, or do you choose not to? This comes up a lot for yoga teachers, and it's really tricky on the brain. So what do I mean when I say mirror? I mean, the rest of the yogis in the class are looking at me, and they might be using their right arm to do something, which is going to be that side of them. And I choose to use my left arm so it looks like we're doing the same side in whatever we happen to be doing. And I'm going to be saying the word right, and I'm going to be guiding them to their right side, but I have to reverse that in my brain and my body and use my left side. Some people gravitate toward it quite easily, and other people get completely tied up in knots. So I don't think there's one right way to do this, but there are a couple of things to be mindful of depending on what you choose to do. So I think you can train yourself to mirror. When I was teaching flow classes, I was able to train myself to mirror to the point where if I tried to use my right arm when I had said right arm to the rest of the room, it felt really strange. My brain program didn't think that was correct. So that's also something that can happen when you're mirroring. But for people that think to themselves, you know what, I am already overwhelmed with trying to remember my sequence and keep my nerves calm, I think it's perfectly fine if you decide to not mirror. You just need to be really clear with the room what side of the body they're going to be using. Something to mention here as well is that we all learn differently. There are going to be people in the room that are strong visual learners, and they may simply just follow you. So if you decide to not mirror and you say, take your right arm up, and you take your right arm up, they very well could lift up their left arm because they're just following along, because they're visual learners. Whereas other people in the room might be better tuned into their ears. And so even though they see you lifting the opposite side, they may still lift up their right arm because they've heard you say the word right. So I think if you're going to not mirror, you have to sometimes reinforce the side of the body that the class is going to be using. Cute ways to do this is to say, your other right arm, and then sometimes people, the penny drops. Oh, excuse me, right arm. What I recommend for the floor, maybe you're able to mirror some things that are standing and it feels a little bit easy. There are definitely some postures on the floor that are tricky. One of those is Ardha Matsyendrasana, which is all sorts of crossing of legs and crossing of arms, and it's a tongue twister anyway. So here's my trick for Ardha Matsyendrasana and other shapes that are like this. I also just want to preface that by saying the benefit of mirroring is that you can continue facing the group. So if you're trying to build a connection with the group, mirroring and facing the group is a lovely idea. Okay, but let's say we're doing Ardha Matsyendrasana, and let's say all the yogis are facing me, and I've decided to face sideways on my mat. This is a really good option because it means that I can drop into my brain's sense of right and left, but it's not too difficult for me to simply turn my head and continue projecting my voice and seeing what's going on in the room. So I can start to cue Ardha Matsyendrasana, pulling in the right foot, crossing it over the left leg. Maybe you're also cueing something with the bottom leg, and then the raising of the left arm. Now, something to be mindful of here is that as you're finishing off this shape, and you might start to turn your head away from the room, be really mindful that the longer that you keep your head turned, your voice is just simply going to bounce off the back wall. Now, if everybody in the room has come into Ardha Matsyendrasana, they will have just turned their heads that way. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with you finishing off the shape with them, and then turn your head back to the room and continue talking through the posture whilst you're just partially demonstrating. And then as they start to unwind their head and their top arm, you can begin to release with them and then come into whatever the counter pose is that you've got in mind, or maybe you're going to go straight into the opposite side. That little trick is great for any of the postures, even the standing postures. But just be mindful that wherever you turn your head, especially if you're doing a seated floor twist, anytime you're facing the back wall, that's where your voice is going to go. So those are just a couple of musings and tips for you. It also can sometimes just take some practice. Maybe you decide to mirror some of the standing postures and you follow this lead by coming to the floor for some of the more trickier postures so that you can use the correct sides of your brain.